simple to-do list, just basically something that will let us add tasks, give it a name, give it a date of when it's due, and just basic ability to add and remove these tasks. So I created a to-do list directory. The next thing I'm going to want to do is run the Application Creatortool. Remember that this is a tool that will create our basic GWT module skeleton for us. So let's do that. The name of the application is Application Creator. That's going to create the skeleton. The first argument is -Eclipse. Remember that that is going to create a debug launch for us inside of Eclipse, which will allow us to debug our application. So I give it the name of the project, -Eclipse to-do list. The next bit of information is going to be the fully qualified class name that I needed to create that will be the front door into our GWT module. Essentially, this is going to be the main class of our GWT module. So the naming structure, there's a convention that you will typically follow. It's just a slightly different than what you would normally do for a Java application. So you start with the typical reverse domain name for your package, in this case com.intertech. Then you have your other packages that you want to use to make sure this is a unique project. So I use oxygenblast.todolist. Then I add a package called client. What we'll see is that we're going to have a couple of different packages in GWT where the GWT compiler is going to expect to find specific types of files. Essentially, anything that we're going to be needed to be translated into JavaScript that's going to be sent to the client needs to be in the client directory. So I create a sub-package called client, and then I give it the name that I want for my main application for my GWT module, in this case, .to-do list. Alright, so let's run this. You'll note that right away it created many different directories. Let's just take a look at a few of these. And just to make it easier, I'm going to switch to the Windows Explorer view. So what did it create for us? Well, it created a shell and a compile tool, just like we saw in the samples, like the mail example we just saw. The shell will be used for launching the hosted browser, and the compiler will be used to take our Java code and translate it into JavaScript. Inside of our source directory, we've got our packages that we just created. And remember that I said that there are going to be some standard named directories that GWT is going to expect. There are 3 typically, and it creates 2 of them for us, client and public. There is a third for server, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But right now, you'll see client. That's what we added to our name. And if I open up client, we'll see that there is the to-do list.java. And if I open this inside of TextPad, just take a quick look at this file that it made for us. This is our entry point. Again, this is going to be our main application. This is what's called when we want to start to run our GWT module. And instead of using a method called main, we'll see that there's a method called onModuleLoad. Just consider that to be the same thing as main for GWT. And in here you'll see an example of creating a just a very simple panel and widget with a button that we'll be able to take a look at and later inspect this code and see how it was built. Right now I don't want you to worry too much about the code, just see that it was generated for us, and this is the method we're going to want to change once we want to create our own working Java code. So we'll jump back to the client, and again the client directory is basically any code that's going to need to be translated into JavaScript that will be run on the client browser. Another directory is public, and all the material in there will also be part of the web application and run on the client browser. The difference between client and public is that client is translated into JavaScript and public is left alone as is. So what you'll see in here are your cascading style sheets and your HTML files. In this case, the 2 defaults that they give us is the entrance to our application. So let's take a quick look at the HTML file. Very simple HTML file. The part that we're mostly concerned with here is this line with the script. And you'll see what it's doing is it's calling into something called com.intertech.oxygenblast.to-do list, nocache.js. Long name. But what that's going to do essentially is take a look at the user agent, try to figure out, okay, what browser is making this request. It'll try to match, by looking at the configuration file, the right combination of HTML files and JavaScript files for this particular browser. And then it will serve that information to it. So that's our client-side entrance to our GWT module, whereas the Java file we just took a look at is going to be the code that's that actually creates the module that's going to be served from this HTML page. So those are the two parts we need. Now this HTML page obviously doesn't need to be translated into JavaScript or into anything else. So that's why it's in the public directory. It needs to be sent to the client browser, but it should just be run as is. So this is where you'll have your HTML and your CSS files.